Good morning. I'd like to call the Logic meeting for September 20th, 2019 to order. I'd like to welcome everybody today for this special presentation by Mr. Quint Studor, and thank everybody for coming. We'll begin the meeting with the invocation and the pledge, so if you're able, will you please stand? Our Heavenly Father, we just thank you for this glorious day, Father God, and all the opportunities in it. We thank you for the opportunity to gather here to hear Mr. Studor about revitalization of communities and his wisdom, Father God. We just ask you to guide him and be with him. Father God, just guide us as we leave here and go back to our communities and our jobs and our families, Father God. We just ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which stands one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, this morning we are honored to have Mr. Studor with the Studor Community Institute with us. And I'd also, when the Logic Committee asked me to try to get Mr. Studor to speak here, I contacted Mr. Ben Bates. And Ben, I want to thank you for making this happen. And I do appreciate it. Mr. Ben got Miss Dottie Dehart, who works with Mr. Quint Studor, to contact me, and we worked on a schedule to see when he could come, and it happened to be September 4th, and you know we were dealing with a hurricane September 4th, so we had to relocate it, reschedule it to today. So I want to thank Miss Dottie Dehart and also introduce another member of their staff, Ms. Nicole Webb Bodie, and she's in the back. So thank you for all the help organizing this. At this time, I'd like to ask Mr. Ben Bates to come up and introduce Mr. Studor. And thank you, Ben.
Thank you. Thanks, Bill. First of all, thank each one very much for this opportunity. And we also want to thank you, our elected official, for your participation in this revitalization effort, because it takes the community, everybody. And we're excited about having Mr. Studor with us. And I would just like to say, when I was introduced to him, I got a copy of his book, Building a Vibrant Community. Most of you have seen this book. If you haven't, I would like for you to get a copy of it, because you can take this book, and every place that you see the word Pensacola, and every place you see the word Escambia County, you could insert Putnam County and Palatka, and it fits us to a T where they were in 2004, 2003, when they started their journey. And the thing that, to me, that he's impressed upon us and everyone that he speaks to is that it's a marathon. It's not going to be something that happened overnight. But I had the opportunity yesterday to talk into our sheriff, Gator, and Joe Wells at lunch. And we got to visiting, and they said, and it came from the sheriff, that we may not be able to see a lot of progress, but you can feel it. People are beginning to feel differently about our community. We're starting to see, we talk differently, Mr. Studor, that I like about him, he gave this morning, he was giving a presentation at the hospital. And a question came up about the negative and the positive. And the answer that he gave just hit me like a ton of bricks. And what a great answer. And he said, he gave an example that when they started in 04 or 05 in Pensacola, that one of his friends came up to him and said, listen, I was having dinner last night with three couples, and man, it was negative about what was going on, and they really didn't like you, and really was throwing rocks at you. And Quint asked him, well, what did you do? He said, well, I didn't do anything. I didn't say anything. And the gist of it was, we've got to do our part and say, hey, wait a minute, let me share with you what's really going on. There was a workshop here a while back, several months ago, when the young professionals came to the county from the funds and asked for some money to do the blue crab. And some of the young people went outside and they were accosted by a person, and the person was attacking them about what they were doing and accused everybody of just listening to that snake oil salesman, Quint Studor. That Studor guy called him a snake oil salesman, you know. And they let the person talk, and after a couple minutes, they introduced themselves and said, "Let me tell you about Mr. Studor." Mr. Studor owned a company. He sold the company for some $325 million. Folks, he could have taken that $325 million and lived like a king anywhere he wanted to, no headaches, not worrying about driving to Palatka from Pensacola, sleeping in our hotel, getting up at 7:30 this morning, making a presentation last night, you know. Am I right or wrong? Yet, I don't know this for a fact, but I would guess he's more than invested well over $100 million of that in his city to make it better. And he's doing it for one reason and one reason only. And I think the same reason that you and I are here. It's not about us, because we've been here, most of us, longer than we're going to be here. It is not about us. You know, what got me involved in it was my daddy taught me, son, if you're going to be involved in something, you leave it better than you found it. And if you can't leave it better than you found it, why in the heck was you involved in it to start with? Well, when I came to Palatka in 1967, our downtown was much more vibrant and much better than it is today. So what we want to do is to leave a better place for our kids and our grandkids and our friends, so they can enjoy life and they would want to come back. And with that, Mr. Studor, I look at it like this, is that when you have a drink, you got to have a straw to stir everything. Mr. Studor is a straw that has come to our community and stirred things up and got people involved. And the key is to continue to work together as a group, everybody involved, from government to private, every group and everybody that we can, as we continue to move forward in this effort. And I'm very honored to present to you today Mr. Quint Studor. Thank you for coming.
Well, it's nice to be here, and they taped last night, and the talk today is going to be about 20% repeat, just to get everybody on the same page, and then it's rather new. But I do encourage you to look at the videotape of last night. You know, when you do certain things, you hope you have an impact, and you don't know. But last night was really worth it for me, and let me explain why. I talked about Chuck Yeager, and I talked about you get through turbulent times, you got to keep the throttle down. And there was a gentleman that came up to me last night, and he's a little older than me. He wished he could retire, but he can't. So financially, he's got to work. And he's in a job, and at his age, it's really hard. And he's been struggling in that job because it's a hard job. And he said to me yesterday after the talk that Chuck Yeager related to him, that though he's going through turbulent times and he'd like to sort of back off, he's got to keep his throttle down, and he'll make it through these turbulent times on his job. Might sound crazy, but that's what makes it worthwhile. The other thing is I don't want to have people think it's all about downtown. It's all about making a community that's great for everyone, for every citizen, no matter what race, no matter what financial condition. We were lucky enough this week to have Mayor Joe Riley, the mayor of Charleston, South Carolina, for like 40 years. And he came in and he told a story which I just loved. He wanted to put something down by the river, and it was going to cost him a little bit of money to buy the land down by the river, to put this thing that would be for the public down by the river. and somebody offered them free land out by the interstate. And people thought he should put this public amenity, which was actually a stadium, out by the interstate because it was free land. And he said, no, I want to put it where the best land is, because this is something that all our citizens are going to go able to enjoy. He talked about a pier that they put out, and he would get up early in the morning and walk downtown to make sure it was clean. And there was a fellow named Clarence Hopkins Jr. Now, Clarence Hopkins Jr. probably didn't have much of a job, and Clarence Hopkins Jr. would be sitting on that pier every morning, many times just dangling his feet in the water. And he went up to Mayor Riley, and Mayor Riley asked him what he was doing. He said, I come down here every morning to just sit by the water. And he thought, isn't that neat? Because sometimes you have to have a lot of money to sit by that type of water. Sometimes you have to be a certain income class to sit in that water. So when they dedicated, they finished the build out. When they dedicated it to everyone, he made sure Clarence Hopkins was sitting in the front seat. He didn't introduce him to embarrass him, but see, that's what it's really about. It's about making sure all citizens have a certain quality of life in our communities, of all races, all financials, and so on. Now you're pretty fortunate. You have a lot of beautiful natural things. My hotel room looks at the parking lot, okay? But I did when I got to look at the river today at breakfast. And you also have bike trails. And how do you maximize, though? And I might give you a few tips on that. But now I do believe in downtowns. And I believe in downtowns for many, many reasons. Number one, research shows that young people want a vibrant downtown. So if you want to keep your young people, you got to create a vibrant downtown. Now, if research by Gallup would have said to me, young people like water slides, I would have tried to build a water slide. If they say young people like rest stops on the interstate, we said, let's create the greatest rest stop in the world so it wasn't the downtown strategy. It was a young people strategy, how to keep young talent in your community. Because over the years, one of the great things that small and mid-market cities have produced is talent that went elsewhere. And these cities didn't even have to pay for the talent that went elsewhere. We raised them, put them through our high schools, and then sometimes put them through our colleges, and then they left. And many times they never came back. And we'll see a little bit later, we have a chance to reverse that migration. And you're very, very fortunate that you're close to Jacksonville, because it's just getting them move a little bit south here. But because, it doesn't hurt to be next to a city when a city gets more expensive, because affordability comes into play. So this is done for elected officials, and it's nice to be here. And the other thing I like about downtowns is taxes. Because, Carol, if I'm not mistaken, your city has a lot of entities that don't pay property tax, right? 47%. That means 53% are picking up the tab for the 47%. Now, what happens is we've got to pick some more of the taxpayer up, because you have roads, you have pipes, you have poles, you have to keep up. And the one thing I like about downtowns is you can go vertical. So Ben, you and your group just bought a building downtown, right? Don't you wish you were from out of town, because they would have loved you for it? No, I swear, I swear to God, it's so bizarre, isn't it? It's so bizarre. When I was sitting in Pensacola and called snake oil, carpetbagger, all sorts of things. Snake oil was actually one of the nicer words. I was excited about that. I used to say, I almost feel like I should walk out of town, call and pretend I'm from out of town, and say, you know that building on the corner of Pallet Box of Maine that's been vacant for all these years? I'm an out-of-town guy, and I'm thinking of buying that and putting a couple $1 million into it, rehabbing it, and bringing it back to life. And oh, by the way, my taxes would probably go from what you're paying now to over $100,000. And I'm thinking about coming to your community and buying that old piece of building that's been sitting there this one, for a decade, unused. What do you think most communities would do if I was from out of town? They would be so excited. They would be almost willing to fly me in. They would meet me somewhere. They would take me around. They would brag to people. Do you know when out-of-town guys think of investing here? and out-of-town guys think of investing here. They would be so excited. It's unbelievable. We had an out-of-town company come to Pensacola. They wanted to come to our port and crush rock. Crush rock. And we had people almost falling all over to get them to crush rock because they were going to crush rock and bring some employees. Now, we didn't think that was a good idea to crush rock downtown. It'd be like crushing rock on your river, then the trucks go through your downtown. But we had people falling all over themselves because this guy was from out of town. Isn't it amazing how sometimes we treat out-of-town people better than in-town people? Because if it's an in-town person, it's going to just get rich. Isn't it bizarre? Probably not here in Putnam County or in Palatka, but have you ever noticed how people are worried about somebody making money? You know, what do you want to say? Well, I hope they go broke. And you want to do, and I get real bold. The longer I'm in Pensacola, the bolder I get. And I say, you should hope I make a ton of money because I'm going to invest it right back in here. The reason you have the Studor Children's Hospital, a brand new children's hospital, is because I live in this community. I wouldn't build this hospital in another community. The reason you have a brand new YMCA is because I live in this community. You should hope your local people do well. And you should hope they care enough about the community that invest back in it. So I hit that real hard because I almost feel I can relate to some of the Putnam One people that are probably rich guys just wanting to get richer, carpetbaggers, and the good old boys. Anybody ever define who the good old boys are in a community? That's such a common term. You know, it's the good old boys. I said, well, can you tell me who they are? Well, I can't tell you who they are. They're the good old boys. It's this vacuum here somewhere. So anyway, that's my 60-second to 3-minute yanka a little bit today. So anyway, I'm going to give you the assessment results. Some of you didn't see these last night. And I hope we keep doing this, and we can do it. You can do it more. You can do the whole county. Basically, we do a quick assessment on where we're going. Today, one of the people from the hospital said, what do you see positive about what we're doing? I say, good self-awareness. Good self-awareness. Because we can't change if you're not self-aware. Now, you're lucky. You were a quarterback, right? Yeah, did you ever use video? Yeah, you know why they showed you video? Self-awareness. If you don't have that video or you can watch it, you might not be self-aware. So we use feedback mechanisms to create self-awareness. Now, if we're self-aware, we can make adjustments. But if we're not self-aware, we can't make adjustments. So I'm on the board of directors of Hazelton Betty Ford, which was one of the most nationally well-known drug and alcohol treatment centers. Well, the first thing they want to do with somebody who comes into treatment is make sure they're self-aware so they can break them through the denial of what's going on. Our community was not that self-aware in 2003 or 4. We had some people that thought the community was just perfect and some people that thought it was the worst in the world. We had some people that go to the city council and say it's the greatest thing in the world. Some people go to city council and say it's the worst thing in the world. So we had a rough time with self-awareness. We actually paid money to become self-aware, and I'll walk you through what we did. You didn't pay money. You just took a quick little thing. So I compliment you on being self-aware. Because if we know where we are, we know where we can go to get there. So let's you walk through. We asked the thing, how engaged do you think the rest of the community is? A year ago, you were a 3 on a 10-point scale. Today, you're a 5. That's okay. According to James Collins, who's done a lot of work on getting companies good or great, he talks about if you go like this, you go like that. It's methodical growth. You ever seen somebody that went on these crash diets, and they lose a lot of weight real fast? A year from then, when you see them, what do you notice? They pick it right back up. So methodical improvement is good. We look at how likely are young people to live here. You still have a ways to go. You're from a 2.2 to a 3.61. We have some strategies on that and some strategies we can talk about, and you need to talk about. How attractive is new business? You went from a 2.1 to a 4.75. I think that's pretty good. How easy to create and run a small business? You've gone from a 2.7 to a 4.1. Hey, I got a secret for you. There was a couple here last night that's thinking of moving to Palatka. And they came up to me. They don't live in Palatka now. You know why they came last night? Because they run businesses. And they're thinking of moving downtown and open some businesses. And they wanted it here last night. And you know what I told them? You better get in now. better get in now, because if you get in a little bit earlier, it's a little bit better than getting in a little later, but it's also a little bit riskier. How rate with your educational system? And you've seen that in your high school graduation. I'm very excited what you're doing at the hospital. If you're not aware of this, every new mother now is getting a tutorial on how to build her baby's brain. And that is, our issue is not third grade reading, fourth grade math. Our issue is children aren't ready for kindergarten. I don't know what your statistic is, but ours is only 47% of our children in Pensacola, Escambia County, are ready for kindergarten. Okay? That's like 59th out of 67 counties in Florida. And so we've been doing this now for 2 years. We've touched 11,000 mothers, what you're implementing here. And the mother watches a video, and then they get a book on how to build their baby's brain. We're doing this with the University of Chicago Medical School and School of Economics. And we can show that a mom knowledge of how to build her brain goes from about a mid-6 to a mid-9 once they understand it. So you should be really pleased. I spoke to your hospital staff today and your head of your OB, and they feel really good about what they're doing. They don't look upon this as one more task. They look upon it as making for a better community. How likely is small business to receive training? Remember, 80% of small businesses won't make it 5 years. And it's not because of passion, it's because they don't have the skill set. I see it all the time. I got a call, we were driving here yesterday, and I got one of these calls that this little restaurant's in trouble. Could I figure out how to loan them money? I said, I've already done that. Let's not do that again. And I will tell you, they should have never opened it where they opened it. But see, they went and they got themselves in trouble. So one of the things you have to do is help make small business work. We're doing something pretty unique right now. We're hiring someone to come in and do market research on our downtown. What stores should be there? What stores might not make it? And if they are, is there a need for them? Because you have people whose hearts get ahead of their brain. And you don't want to be excited when you cut the ribbon. You want to be excited when the company's made it 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. So Kathleen and I have talked a lot about training and development with Ben actually this morning on how to beef up training and development for small businesses because they can't go out of town. I mean, they can't. My wife runs a coffee shop and an olive oil store. If I tell her, why don't you go to Orlando for 2 days of training? She said, I can't. I can't. She can't. She's so worried somebody won't mop the floor or something like that. So the reality is you have to do unique training that's in the community that doesn't get in the way of the person running the business. How vibrant is your downtown? You've gone from a 2.5 to a 4.58. Ben, I drive by, I look at that, I think I'm looking at that building you guys bought, right? When I look out my hotel room. It's like a yellow mustard color building. I'm so excited to be on that rooftop deck, I want to tell you, if you can pull one off. That's going to be the place to be in the community. And you have to go one building at a time, one store at a time, and you got to keep them tight. Because if you spread them too far out, you don't get the synergy. And I know that's hard and discipline, but we almost have circles. We take the community and we draw a circle. Let's get this circle right, then we can go to this circle, then we can get to this circle. We're now been doing this for a while. We're in our 7th circle. Our first circle was Palafox and Maine. And then we sort of kept doing circles, and now we're on our 7th little circle. Not big. You know, there may be 6 or 7 little businesses or buildings and so on. Getting wealth off the sidelines. I talked a lot about this. If you want outside investors to come into your community, they're going to say, why aren't the local people investing? I mean, it's sort of like to eat your own food. I mean, have you ever met anybody that works in a restaurant and says, ooh, I wouldn't eat there, I see the kitchen? You know, what I'm saying is if you're not willing to eat your own food, eat your own cooking, how can you expect somebody to eat your own cooking? So you got to get wealth off the sidelines. But that wealth is hard to get off the sidelines. So if I go to you and I said to you, you're currently making 8% on your investment, and you come down and invest in the downtown, I think I can get you 5%. That doesn't sound right, does it? Because I'm asking you to give up money. So when I say wealth off the sidelines, it doesn't mean middle income people. It means some of your wealthier people that probably have money tied up in wealth management. And we have to convince them to put it into not all of it, put some of it into the community, but they won't make what they would make if they just kept it where it's at. So what we find, and I'll walk through the three type of investors. How good are you at measuring? And I think that's really key for the elected officials here particularly, is to create a dashboard. And I know you're working on that right now, because your dashboard tells you, like any dashboard, whether it's on a car or a plane, it tells you how you're doing. So for example, in Pensacola, we have 17 metrics on our dashboard. We went up in 9 this year. We stayed the same in like 5 or 6, whatever that math is, and we went down in 2. We got bigger. Our obesity, we're 62nd out of 67 counties in obesity. We're like 65th out of 67 in preterm births. We have a lot of poverty in our area. And we have a lot of poverty, and we have a lot of young moms having babies. And they're not getting prenatal care. In fact, we have 78 and NICU, they call them, in our children's hospital. And do you know how many of those beds we fill up every single day? 78. Because we have so much preterm birth and so on. Those are 2 areas we're not moving in the right direction. Where we are is crime. Our crime is down, which is good. Where we're moving up is income. We have now popped up. 58% of our households live in middle income families versus 50 before. So we've popped up. You know where else we're popping up? Population. Our population is increasing. So we went below 300,000 to 312,000 in the county. We went from 50,000 to about 57,000 people in the city. So all of a sudden we're getting more people, which is good. More people, more shoppers, more money, and $1 turns over 7 times. Successful in working together. Local government entities, are they aligned? You've gone from a 2.68 to a 4.56, and these are really important. Our community would just be happy if our elected officials would sit in the same room. You know, really. Will the city council and the county commissioners at least meet once in a while as a group, because that sort of gets in the other towns, and you're starting to do that and so on. Because we're all in this together. I get a kick out of cities and counties, because I always have to point out, Terrell, you're a smart guy. Can I jump to the conclusion that every citizen of Palatka is also a citizen of the county? Yeah. And sometimes we act like they're 2 separate countries, these little cities and counties, when we're all the same. But here's the one thing that there's lots of things, but almost 9 out of 10, on a 1 through 10, 8.93 say we want to make this better. We're engaged in this. Now that could be skewed, because those fill out the survey, but I think it's pretty positive information. So now let's go into a completely different presentation from last night. But you want to watch last night, because I thought it was sort of, we had some fun. I hope they did the question and answers, because that was sort of fun. Somebody accused me of being a kumbaya guy. Anyway, you know, we're like too positive. Anyway, and I get that. But you know what? You need some kumbaya. You need some positiveness. You need somebody confident. Terrell, you were a quarterback. I think you never went to your huddle and said, whoa, did you see the size of those guys? We're going to get killed today. Whoa, let's not go out of the locker room, huh? You have to have confidence. If you don't have confidence in yourself, in your own community, who's going to have confidence in it? It reminds me years ago, you know, I've done a lot of work in healthcare. A nurse manager came up to me, and she said, Quint, I need to talk to you. She said, nobody wants to work in our department. She said, we're the hardest working nursing unit in the whole entire hospital. No one wants to work here. And we're always short-staffed. We're the hardest worker, and we're always short-staffed. What can I do to get more people to work in my department? I said, you got to shut up. Who wants to? I don't even want to come to your department. Sit down with your employees and say, what can we do to make this a more attractive place to work? Going to the cafeteria and whining that we don't have enough people isn't going to get us more people. Whining that we're overworked isn't going to get us less work. It's going to get us more work. So you have to do self-talk. So let me walk through some progress blockers. Number 1 is denial. And the beauty is you're not in denial. You're in denial. You know where you're at. You know you want to get better, but also you know you love the community. We blame. It's easy to blame. Blame people, blame this group, that group, blame. When we first started doing the early brain development, the first letter to the editor was negative. And it said, you know, they were afraid we're going to use tax dollars for it, which we never said we're going to use tax dollars. And then they said our problem is all these single moms. That's the problem. We have too many single families. Yeah, we do, but we can't fix that. But we can fix the moms getting educated in the hospital. So they blamed the fact that people weren't married. Rationalization. Rationalization is subconsciously coming up with why. Like yesterday, a gentleman said, well, you have to understand, Escambia County is not Putnam County. Escambia County has 300 people. Yeah. Escambia City of Pensacola has 58,000. Yeah. But see, that's rationalizing they could do it easier than we can do it. You can't do that. Because with Columbia, Mississippi, you're a big metropolitan compared to Columbia, Mississippi. And so you got to be careful not to rationalize why it's harder on you. And we're going to get to that in a little bit, which is comparing versus relating. We're so much more alike than we are different. Again, I did a lot of work in hospitals. I would pick two people. I pick different races, different sexes, different cities, different hospitals, different jobs. And we go through how they were so different. And then we'd start asking about how much they were so alike. And we'd even get down to not only you're so much alike, you're sitting in the same conference at the same time, and I'm having the same conversation with both of you. We're so much more alike than we are different, but we gotta relate, not to compare. So we get a lot of benchmarking. So with Springfield, Ohio, sending 18 people to our community next week. Now, we're different than Springfield, Ohio. They're in Ohio, we're in Florida. They're close to Ohio State University, Columbus, Ohio, which is a big competitor for them for young talent. We don't have that with us here. Completely different climates. They're an industrial town, so they got these big, old, empty buildings downtown because there's not the industry anymore. We don't have those. Ours blew away in some hurricane, I'm sure, if we even had them. But the reality is we're so much different. Yet you'll find we're so much alike. You know, how do you keep the young people? How do you make a good downtown? You know, how do you make sure that you lower your crime? How do you have a good educational system? And then you have to ask yourself, is it a lack of will or a lack of skill? And I think here it's skill, not will. And that means keep building up the skill set and the muscle of the people in leadership in order to be successful. And for a lot of you elected officials, that also means training the employees in your place. I did the strategic plan for Fort Walton Beach this year, the city of Fort Walton Beach. Do you know, for the first time ever, you know what the #1 thing is on their strategic plan? Employee engagement. They've come to the conclusion that if they can't keep their employees, nothing else matters. So in the past, it was maybe this, this, and this. Those are still there. They want to take advantage of the water and do something with something called the landing. And then they're trying to, they have a giant road going through downtown, which doesn't work well. So they're trying to relocate downtown a little bit closer to the water and sort of thicken it. Those are very important strategies. But the #1 strategy is keeping talent, which I think is pretty cool. I don't know if you have a rough time. You know what their biggest talent issue right now is? Police and fire. Police, fire, and mechanics. Because I don't know about you, but I bet you wages have gone up with that group pretty much. The demand. Could you get a chief of police? I bet you I could get you a job tomorrow. Yeah, you could hop in the car and I could take you to Pensacola and you'd be working the night shift by the time we got there. Because you know what? They have a shortage of police officers. And they have so many young police officers now, they also have a shortage of experience. So what I'm saying is, if you don't adjust some of your key positions, you're going to lose your talent. And these are important people. So I think that's sort of interesting. And that's a lack of will and that's skill and lack. So you have to have both. You have the will, we're building the muscle and the skill. So let's talk about financial investors, and I'll cover this last night, I'll go quick. There's 3 types. There's pure philanthropy. For example, philanthropy in the HCA, your local hospitals, paying somebody $10,000 to come talk to students, right? That's philanthropy. That's total pure philanthropy. Then there's hybrid philanthropy. That's Putnam One, who might buy a building downtown that's got a bit philanthropy and a bit ROI, which means they won't make what they could at Schwab or Merrill Lynch or Wells Fargo, but they also don't want to lose money. Because how many investors are going to come behind them if they say it's a great deal? You only lose a little. Now, you're going to get that sometimes. You're going to get that. It's a long-range plan. It's a long, because you're hoping the whole thing moves, so there's risk. Then the third phase of investors are pure ROI. And you want to get to that. You want to get to that. So, for example, in Pensacola, it only took 15 years. Stone Capital is now coming in big time with private investment downtown. A guy named Charles Davis, he's from the Northeast. He's invested a lot of money in Miami. His company owns Hershey Chocolate. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of Hershey Chocolate. And basically, he now is purchasing property in Pensacola because he believes it's a good investment now. He believes it's moving in the right direction. So he is a private investor. I think that's good, but it doesn't start off that way. But I'd still like to have local investors, but the problem is we don't have, he's worth a couple $2 billion, his company. So he can come in and do some things that we could never do, including me. So he can bring something to the table that we just can't. We have been able, through private, and our public officials will like this, to get some great consultants into town. So we had Scape out of New York that just took our whole waterfront and redoing the waterfront to make it more accessible and approachable. We had a beach that used to be our beach that for African Americans years ago, and then when they decided to integrate Pensacola, they just closed down the beach, put a fence up, and filled in the swimming pool. Now, that sat there for years and years and years. And we just unchanged it and opened it up. And Scape said this could be a great public beach right downtown. And it's in the minority communities, which would be great because it would really move the west side of Pensacola. And so we've looked at that. Now we got lucky because the city's rebonding some money and going to put $17 million into putting an educational center downtown on the water. But why? Because we also brought in a guy named James Lima. James Lima is an expert on making sure if you spend public money, you get private investment around it. So he says if you're going to spend public money down there, you better bring in 5 to 10 times private investment to pay for that public because you just don't want public. We also have DPZ and Jeff Speck in right now, and they're looking at 26 acres because we want to make sure it's developed the right way. Panama City has a guy named Vic Dover who's unbelievable and go online. Now, sometimes their city's paying for it, sometimes private's paying for it, but there are that time when you need to bring in outside expertise. And by the way, elected officials get beat up for that too. According to Tom Murphy, the mayor of Pittsburgh, says the reason that elected officials don't hire outside talent sometimes is because we get beat up for it. Sometimes they think you should be an expert in everything, and you can't be. And sometimes you have to bring in outside talent in order to bring in intellectual capital that you can't have. And the good news is once they give you your plan, you don't pay for them anymore. They go back to where they come from, which isn't bad. So here's the 4 circles: education, which is not only high school graduation, it's really VPK, getting these kids ready for kindergarten and that early brain development. We look at economic development today, the world has changed. The world has completely changed. It's not about shovel-ready. We all got shovel-ready land. I mean, everybody has shovel-ready land. Any community you go to has a commerce park with some shovel-ready. Is your commerce park totally full? Nobody's is. Because all of a sudden the world has changed. You know who creates about over 90% of all jobs in any city or county? Local. It's a local organic growth. So when we look at economic development, we look at growing the companies that are currently here, making sure that they can add employees and so on. When we look at civic engagement, it's raising the civic IQ. And your Platka Young Professionals are going to bring a civic education program here where people are going to be able to hear the experts of experts talk about parking, talk about traffic, talk about social equity. We just had Mayor Joe Riley talk in about saying no to bad development. He said, if you say no to bad development, you end up with better development. Because sometimes we get so desperate for development, if somebody shows up, we are so excited about it. We're just fighting something in Pensacola again, Terrell. They want to put big ice machines all over downtown, you know, like you see in the parking lot of okay? And we don't think that'd be good at the time. But somebody offers a few bucks, and here it goes. And so it's a tough road balancing it. And of course, then there's downtown. So now is your time, but it's also every small and mid-market's town side. It's just not Platte or Putnam County, it's everybody's time. And now let me explain why. For the first time ever, we've got two things happening for us that are good. And I'm a small town type person. I spent a lot of years in Wisconsin. You know, I'm a small town person. When I say small town, that can range. We went to Columbia, Mississippi at 1,600 people. We go to Springfield, it's 52,000. But we've been hurt by migration of talent. So let me explain what's working in our favor. Two things. Cities are getting too expensive for young people. They're not affordable. Anybody, you know, where do all young people, and you know where all young people that live in Pensacola want to live if they could right now? Nashville. Nashville. Anybody seen Nashville lately? They don't have any more property left. Seriously, I talked to a general contractor there. Because of the stone, they can't build anything more. They are almost built out. Now, when you can't build anything more, that means what you have gets pretty prime. It's very, very expensive. Some of the Texas cities we look at. Do you know what a studio apartment costs in Odessa, Texas, right now, in Midland, Texas? $2,700 for a studio apartment. You know why? There's oil money there. People come in on Monday, they work till Friday, and they fly back out. Austin, Texas, another place that exploded. Too expensive. You know where we lose some of our young people to now? Tampa. Tampa's sort of a town that's got a lot of buzz to it. But for many people, those get too big and too expensive. So one of the things that we can offer in our communities, like Putnam County and Palatka, is affordability. I mean, I drove all over. I don't know what the houses are, but I bet you they're cheaper here than Jacksonville. Just a wild guess. I bet you it's cheaper than Orlando. Bet you cheaper than Tampa. I bet you a little cheaper than even Savannah. I bet you a little cheaper than Charleston. Bet you a little cheaper than Atlanta. So you have affordability. Now you have to have opportunity and vibrancy. The other thing is virtual workplaces. People can now work anywhere. Many people do not have to be where they're working. So you can work anywhere. And those are the type of people you want. You want people that can work anywhere but want to live in a community that they want to live in. The third thing, which I can bring up, I said too, there's a third thing. For the first time, young people pick where they want to live. Then they go find the job. I would have never done that. But young people will say, I love bass fishing. I want to go to a place where there's bass fishing, and then I'll figure out what I can do. And by the way, I can work virtually anyway. So let me walk through government. There's a big confusion, and if you read The Coming Jobs Work by Jim Clifton, government was never meant to be an economic engine. Now, I think politicians have sort of brought that on their own at times because they run for office promising jobs. Okay, that's not really what they were meant to do. Government was never meant to be the economic engine. Private businesses were meant to be the economic engine. And what Jim Clifton says is when communities become vibrant, it's because private business says we got to do something because we got to help our companies by making this a better community because that means better shoppers, it means more money, and it means more talent. So I think sometimes we put government elected officials in an area they were never meant to be. Now, do they want to help with economic development? Yes. Can they do some things? Absolutely. But they can't be the major engine. Private businesses must be. Their first and foremost job, as you know, is to keep it clean and safe. And if you can't go clean and safe, nothing else matters. And that's why I was talking about how important making sure you have the right police officers, making sure you retain the right talent. I mean, ask yourself, if you have something going on, when you call the police department, would you like them to say, oh, this is exciting, we have one of our brand new officers, they've never been involved in something like this, but they're wanting to? I don't think so. You want somebody with experience. So what does elected officials, because I thought this was for elected officials, what do they need to do? We found, it's in my book, consistent guidelines regarding public property. One of the big questions I get in communities, and I just got it at the Seaside Institute this week, I got it last week at the Florida Planning Association. Have you ever had anyone buy a piece of property downtown and sit on it? Has that ever happen? How does that do for the downtown? It hurts the downtown. And they sit on it, and then it erodes. And this is everywhere in the United States. And sometimes they live here, and sometimes they don't. Okay? And then, of course, they ignore the codes, so they have all these code violations, but they don't do anything about it. And then that hurts everybody around them. In Janesville, Wisconsin, for the first time ever, they told one of the landlords, if you don't take your building up to a certain level, we're going to tear it down. It's gotten so bad that we're going to tear it down if you don't bring it up to a certain level. Because what we have to do is make sure that we're setting consistent guidelines regarding public and private property and keep people up, and specifically the public property you own, but that should really say regarding property in general. Be true to your RFP process, and you probably don't go through this, but if you have a process, be true to it. Saw a situation where the city government told everyone to make sure their RFP was in by a certain time at a certain date, and then when they went to see the government open them up, they decided because somebody asked for more time, they were going to give more time. Don't change the rules. And if you do, let people know you're changing the rules, or it looks like you're showing favoritism. Create smart zoning rules, and this is really tough. We believe in overlay districts. And you tell private people that you're going to have an overlay district, and they go wild. We got real lucky because the people that own most of it, we all said we want an overlay district, except a few builders. They wanted no one telling them how to do it. But you've got to keep the integrity of your neighborhoods. You've got to make sure that, doesn't mean people can't, doesn't mean everything looks alike, but there's certain overlay districts that you want to make sure the right thing is in the right place, and so on. There was a video your young professionals are going to show on Joe Riley talking about how strict they were with affordable housing looking good. And they have a lot of affordable housing, and they subsidize a lot of it, but they didn't want it to look just like little cheap houses. They made affordable housing, and they also didn't put it all in one spot. They integrated it throughout the community, so it just didn't sit all in one spot. It's pretty unique what they've done. The government needs to be easy to work with. I was saying to Bill, I don't think we're any different, but I do know one thing, and you probably do it. At 9 o'clock on Wednesdays, you can go to City Hall if you're looking at getting a permit, and everybody you need to talk to is all in the same room. So it's a one-stop shop for permitting. So everybody is in one room. So you don't have to go to 7 departments. You can go to one room at one time, and everybody's there to guide you through the process. Make sure your codes are clearly spelled out and they make sense, and enforce them consistent and fairly. But you also, I know this is going to sound crazy, you need to be flexible. You know what one of the most flexible cities in the country is? It's Manhattan in New York City. It's unbelievable. If you go to Manhattan in New York City, on Sundays now, between 56th Street and about 52nd Street, they close off 6th Street. They close it off. They close off streets more and more all the time now for markets, because markets have been popular. Now, you don't have this issue in your downtown, but on their downtown, like 57th Street, they have parallel parking spots. So they're now taking them out, and on certain days, letting restaurants put tables out on the parallel parking spots to add some outside dining. What I'm saying is that's that flexibility. They're also allowing people in Pensacola now for the first time to put apartments on top of garages and not go crazy. They're allowing some more flexible housing in the area. Muskegon, Michigan had a big part of their downtown that had nothing. So they put a whole bunch of little teeny shops in there, and then they let people rent them for the day, and they started all these little businesses. And then what happened is it's gotten so popular now, they're now doing permanent, and they're moving them somewhere else. So you have to also be willing to let people try things with pop-up shops. Food trucks, oh my gosh. When food trucks were first coming to Pensacola, the fight between the restaurant and the food truck was just unbelievable. Now that they're everywhere, people have learned to live with it, and the beauty is if you got a bathroom, those people got to come eat at your place if they want to go to the bathroom. So it sort of works out in this crazy way. Fear stands for fantasized experiences appearing real. Sometimes the fear of what's going to happen is much worse than the reality of what's going to happen. Benchmark other cities. I think, Ben, you said some of your visit Palatka people went to a Savannah to see what they're doing. But when you go, don't compare, relate. In 2004, I benchmarked the first city. I went to Asheville. First thing I said is they've got it easy. They got Vanderbilt Mansion. You ever been to the Grove Hotel? I mean, that's unbelievable. I could sit by that fireplace for days. So they got the Grove Hotel. They got these mountains. They got this Vanderbilt estate. And I'm thinking, and it's unbelievably nice. So I'm only there 25 minutes, and I'm now clinically depressed. We will never, ever be like Asheville. Luckily, Pat Whalen had a slideshow, and he showed what Asheville used to be like and what it is now. And he showed boarded up buildings. He showed a city that was going nowhere, okay? That showed us it could be done. Now, in 2019, Pensacola was named the 15th most desirable city to live in the United States of America, according to U.S. News and World Report. We were 15. Guess who's 16? Asheville. So it's sort of an interesting thing. It's like Jacksonville Jaguars, you're 2-1. Don't you wish the season could end right now? I mean, 2-1. You got that young quarterback. Did you see him get off the airplane the other day? Dressed up like a disco guy. But what I'm trying to say is you got to have thoughts that you can be better. But don't get depressed because it's a long process. It's a long process. But you got to benchmark other cities. But don't look why they're better than you. Just look how much you're so alike, what you can learn. We go to other cities. We were in Sedona, Arizona, my wife and I. And we're in Sedona, Arizona, and we saw a sculpture like a statue of a painter. And he was like painting. And then we saw people standing on the other side taking like, what are they, selfie or social media things and posting it. And we thought that's pretty cool. That's Sedona. So now we have a statue downtown of a cartoonist. So we have a statue downtown of a local cartoonist, Earl Bowden, and he's sitting with like cartooning, and there's a chair on the other side of him, and now people can sit down and have their chair with Earl Bowden. And we have a little history of Earl Bowden. We would have never thought of that if we hadn't gone to Sedona, Arizona. Wouldn't even have hit that we could do that if we hadn't gone to Sedona, Arizona. Vunerv, we put a tree in the middle of one of our streets. They're very popular in Europe. They're called Vunerv. It's called a living street. It's where cars and people intermingle. Now, I will tell you, Terrell, the fire department wasn't that excited about this tree, okay? They had a little challenge with it till we showed them, we measured that you could go around it and everything. And we put we went and put it in around the holidays, and we put Christmas tree lights in it. Guess what never came down? Christmas tree lights. So we have this, now people get their selfie in front of this tree in the middle of a street. The reason we did that is because we wanted people to walk that way. Because we had retailers here, and we started to get retailers a side street over. So how do you get people to walk over? You give them some reason to go. So now we have a Vunerv and a statue for them to go walk down to. So those are some of the things. Small towns are hot right now. They are the thing. You can read it everywhere. Small towns is where people want to be. Big towns have gotten a little too big, a little big unaffordable, and people want to be in smaller communities, especially people with children. So here's how governments can really leverage it. You're interim city manager, right? I think they should change your title. You do. When you call people managers, what do they think about doing? Managing. Managing a finite set of expenses. They don't think about building. I think city managers need to be city builders. because that's really what we are looking for. People in elected positions need to be called community builders and chief engagement officers. Their job is to engage the community and make it work. Get strategic and work off objective data. And we're going to talk about that later with a small group. Make sure you have your dashboard in place. We just did objective data. We used the Mason-Dixon Company to do a quality of life survey. And we know now that 63% of our people think we're moving in the right direction. We know that right now we went from 20% of the people thinking it was a good city for an entrepreneurship. It's over 50%. In fact, we're just named the 17th best city to start a business by Go Verizon. But I'll tell you where we're not, is children's well-being. We do not do well in children's well-being objectively. We have too much child abuse going on. We have too many thoughts. 78% of our community said they would rather pay an extra $40 on their property taxes if it could go to helping children in our community right now. But that's objective data. And by the way, it was 78% Republican and 76 or 78% Democrat. They all agreed that we'd be willing to do some extra things if we can help our children, because we have too much child abuse in Escambia County. We have too much preterm birth in Escambia County. But that's objective data. Carol, I hear you're thinking of moving City Hall, huh? Bet you that's fun, isn't it? You should have been there last night. We talked about the phases. But see, that's objective data. But I don't know where it's going to turn out, but I hope whichever turns out, the people that didn't get exactly what they want will support whatever happens. And I used an example of our mayor, our past mayor. He was, well, you know that beach I told you about? He was going to get money from Fish and Wildlife to put an industrial fish hatchery on that beach, and we didn't agree, some of us, and the mayor and us were on wrong sides, different sides, not wrong sides, different sides. So we sued Fish and Wildlife over it, and they said, we're not dealing with these nuts in Pensacola. We're not going to build a hatchery there. Do you know what the mayor did the next week? He opened it up as a public beach. So what I'm saying is, even though he didn't get his way, as soon as he didn't get his way, he jumped and said, then let's make the final decision the best. If the City Hall moves, let's make it a great move. But you're going to have to spend money either way. But use objective data, not emotional data. And that's really what you're going to. And the last thing, I know some of you, our hospital's always been downtown. So they announced they're moving it out of downtown. Oh, gosh. People said they're deserting. It was the word, deserting downtown. And they also said, what about all those employees that work at the hospital? So you know what we did? They did a zip code check. You know how many people truly live by the hospital? None of them. Less than 100 out of 7,200, less than 100. So I'm just saying, I'm not saying which way to go, but I'm giving you a couple tips. Use objective data, and whoever doesn't get their way, still make whatever the final decision is to support it and not sabotage it. There's 3 types of people, according to Drexel University and cities. Win-win people. They literally, you know Mort O'Sullivan? He's a win-win guy. We both know Mort. He's head of the board of University of West Florida. You put him in a room, his whole goal is win-win. His whole goal is win-win. Then there's win-lose guys and ladies. Now, what Drexel did is they gave everybody the same case study. Like they give you and you the same case study. There were 3 ways you can find. You could find a win-win in it, a win-lose, or a lose-lose. Same stuff. Some people found the win-win, and some people found the win-lose, okay? Attorneys, what type of people do you think most attorneys are? They're a little win-lose sometimes. There's a winner and a loser when they go to court. And then there's lose-lose. And they'd ask the people that lost. They said, well, you know, you lost him. You lost. And that meant all these bad things. You know what their number 1 comment was when they lost? They lost too. You have certain people that enjoy watching, their endorphins kick in watching somebody else lose versus them win. And what I'm trying to say is, as this goes down, I was so excited to read about this in the paper. Not that it's fun, But what a great case study to see how mature this community is. What a great case study to see if this community can use objective data. And there are going to be some people that aren't going to be happy no matter which way it goes, right? And they can either sabotage where it's going and be bitter, or they can say, yeah, we didn't get our way, but we're going to support it because we want what's best for our community. I have a t-shirt that says, don't be bitter, be better. I do. I have a t-shirt that says that. I like that. I bought it. The other one I have says, that's a bad idea. When do we start? Maintain focus on a downtown because that's going to give you better intense tax dollars, and it's going to give you the synergy you need, and it's going to give you the young people you need. And guess who else likes the same stuff the young people like? Old people. They like coffee shops. We just opened our first bookstore downtown. We have never had a bookstore downtown. Our first bookstore opened up, okay? And I know it sounds crazy, but you know, there's the age diversity is incredible in a bookstore. By the way, you can't just have a bookstore, it has to have coffee and wine and books. Work to create an entrepreneurial system, and I'll share with you today. I got lucky. Stuart Walton read my book, Vibrant Community Partners. He's grandson of Sam Walton. And him and his family's very wealthy. And they're going to live in Bentonville forever. But he's determined to make Bentonville a place he wants to live. So they're working on creating an eco-entrepreneurial system. So I went there 3 times. So we now have actually moved ahead. We've got a full-time person right now doing a 6-month study on how do you create an eco-entrepreneurial system in small and mid-market cities. And you know, we did a survey of all these people, and we thought they'd want space, co-work space as a hot item. That didn't come up number 1. We thought they'd want money, you know, startup cash. That's there, but it's not number 1. You know what the number 1 thing you need in a good entrepreneurial system is? Mentors. The number 1 thing is they want mentors. So we got real lucky. The local university, some other people have chipped in. So we're bringing MIT into town for a certain dollar amount, and they're going to train we have mentors right now, but they're literally going to train 100 people on how to be good mentors for small businesses. If you're a community with retirees, you're in the mecca of mentorship because you have people that can be valuable mentors, but it's not just an easy task. So we'll share everything we do, we share with because we're all in this together. Us small and mid-market cities got to stick together. I own a minor league baseball team. We're affiliated with the Minnesota Twins. Good year to go to the Twins, by the way. Anyway, but all these small market baseball teams, they all stick together. They all stick together. They don't hang out with the Yankees. They don't hang out with the Dodgers at these major league owner meetings. They all go hang out together because we got something in common. But we can win this thing because for the first time, the environment's moving our way. People are looking to migrate this way. It's never happened in the last 5 decades that people are wanting to come back home versus stay where they are. Your Palatka Young Professionals are going to do some civic IQ things. I encourage you to attend. It's to make sure everybody's on the same page. John Maxwell, I was interviewed by him about 3 weeks ago in Orlando. They asked 4 people to come to his national conference and talk about transformation because he believes the next, anybody ever hear of John Maxwell? He writes books. Basically, he believes the next great transformation is communities. And he says what a transformational leader is, they do something that makes a difference with people who make a difference at a time to make a difference. So let me close a little bit with this. Remember the movie, The Wizard of Oz? Remember that movie? They had Dorothy. Remember Dorothy? She hated where she lived. Small little Kansas town, I think. Didn't like her family. Didn't like where she lived. Nothing really happening. Then you got these 3 characters. One's looking for a heart. One's looking for a brain. Okay? One's looking for courage. Remember them? So then they're going to go find the great Oz. You know, today what we'd call Oz is a consultant. They were going to look for the great Oz, you know? And I loved his looks. He was sort of short, a little bit heavy, sort of a lightish color hair. Anyway, really, if you look at it, I do have a little bit of an Oz look in me if you look at the movie. And anyway, so they're going down the yellow brick road, and they're looking for Oz because Oz is going to give them the answer. And if you remember how that movie ended, what Oz did was tell them they had it in them all the time. What they lacked it was self-confidence. What they lacked it was a good self-image. What they sometimes lacked is to push the throttle down and go through the turbulent times. If you remember the turbulent times, things were spinning. The Wicked Witch, they got to step up and walk through, but Oz didn't get them through. They got themselves through. So when it gets all done, he told them you had it in you right from the start. You had it in you. You had the courage. You had the heart. You know, you had the brain. You sometimes didn't realize it. And if you remember what Dorothy said, remember where Dorothy ended up? She ended up back in that same place in Kansas, that same people. And what she said is she was so glad to be home. And there's no place like home, and there's no place like Palatka. The answers are out there. The answers are in here. And you have the courage, you have the heart, and you have the brains to make it happen. Thank you very much for allowing me to be here. Thank you. Whatever you want. Anybody have a question, comment? Want to buy some snake oil?
Thank you. I just wanted to make a comment about the young professionals. I have a daughter and a son-in-law that are part of the young professionals, and my wife and I were babysitting last night for them so they could come here. Yes. And so when they came over to my house last night to pick up their daughter, we normally talk about Gator stuff right before a Gator game. You all would have been so impressed with their discussions last night around our dining table. Gators weren't mentioned one time, but they talked about communities, they talked about early childhood development, they talked about a sense of place, and all that is because all of the work that you've done and your committee to bring that and to have them part of that, and I want to thank you for that.
You know, one thing we'll never agree on is who helps who most. One of my spiritual advisors, a guy named Norm Adams, and every time I try to thank Norm, I say, we'll never agree on this one. Who helps who most? But thank you very much. Any other questions? We'll be around. If you haven't seen the paper, I thought the picture of me is quite nice today. And I love working with you. You know, we talk on the phone periodically. We get phone calls. You know, we go to a lot of cities now. We go to a lot of communities now. But you were the first. And it's like you don't want to show favorites, but you know, there's you have you know how it is. The first one, sometimes you have a special relationship with. Whether you're a football coach, it's your first recruiting class. Whether you're a teacher, it's some of the kids you first taught. Maybe for us, it's the first community that we were able to reach into. And it's good. You don't know this, but I get a radio interview maybe once or twice a week. I have columns that go out. I'd say 90% of the interviews that I'm on, I talk about Putnam County and Palatka. I throw it in there some way. In fact, I'm going to be keynoting a talk in Jacksonville coming up, and I'll talk a little bit about you guys. Because if you do it, and you got a ways to go, like I said, you're on the 4th mile of a 26-mile marathon, but there's so many small and mid-market cities that have given up. There's so many of them that don't understand that they can do something about it. So when I was in Chicago, I worked in a hospital that was in a tough neighborhood, really tough. A lot of Medicaid, a lot of self-pay. 30% of our babies were born drug addicted, some type of substance abuse from their mom. That meant that they couldn't take the child home, so all of that. And we had no private rooms, the whole bit. And we were named Hospital of the Year one year. And what happened is for every hospital that was an inner city hospital, for every hospital that didn't have private rooms, we were a sense of you can make this happen. There's a lot more cities that are like Palatka than like Manhattan. There's a lot more cities that are like Palatka than Jacksonville, specifically in Florida. So as you go about your journey, you're not only helping Putnam County and Palatka, you have a chance to help every small and mid-market community in the United States of America, because we want them to benchmark you someday. We want them to come here, some small town in Mississippi that doesn't think they can do it. In fact, the town we were in Mississippi had a river just like you, and they had quit looking at it. we had to tell them, maybe you should put kayaks on it. Maybe you should do some of these things. So don't underestimate the difference that you can make and are making. Thank you very much.
Your contest that you ran here has become a national.
Oh, people can't believe for $1,000 you get 135 ideas. Now the challenge is implement the ideas. Somebody asked me the other day, I had cartoons yesterday. I had cartoons going back in the early 80s when somebody said we should revitalize downtown. And then it was 89, 93, 94, when we should do something about maximizing the waterfront. Everything we're doing, people have been writing about for 20 or 30 years. So the difference wasn't the planning, the difference was the execution and the implementation. And that's what separates the ones who make it and the ones that don't. So you got a great start with 135 ideas. Now it's how do we get as many as we can implemented, particularly the ones that don't cost a lot of money. Thank you. That's a best practice. That's a best practice. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Quint. Quint, could you come up front? And I also want to ask Dottie Dehart to come up front and Nicole to come up front. As my brother said last night, that Quint could be anywhere in the country doing this, but he's in Putnam County and in Palaca. So I think we need to give them another round of applause for everything that they're doing here. And on behalf of the Putnam County Board of County Commissioners, our staff, and our county administrator, I brought some Putnam County pins to give them. And so I set them up here to do it right now. And Quint saw one, so he went ahead and took one. So he's proudly wearing it. So if you didn't notice that, but I want to give you a Putnam County pin.
I would like a Putnam County blanket if you have one.
So, and you said Commissioner Turner's in charge of the thermostat. Exactly. So, but anyway, thank you so much for your presentation. And Logic Committee, thank you for coming to this special meeting. This does not take the place of the meeting that we're going to have. We're going to have another meeting the 25th, so hopefully everybody can be there. Mr. Ben Bates, I want to thank you for arranging this. And is there any further business? Okay, we stand adjourned.